I didn't see you there. Today on the show, we'll be discussing Japanese culture and communication. I'm Mr. Bevel, and today on the show, I will be joined on this journey with Miss Prattle and Mr. Blathers. Throughout this section, we will briefly discuss a Japanese folktale and how it directly relates to the morals and values that Japanese people uphold. We will also make correlations between such values, such as the respect for elders, honorifics, the role they play in Japanese intercultural communication, and much more. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We will relay the order in which the three main headings will be discussed. The first is business/formal settings, and it is followed by school, then informal settings. Communication will play a large role in how we approach each setting. Come join us.
Momotaro, translated in English as Peach Boy. This folktale touches on the effects of growing up with the love of your mother and the discipline of your father in Japan. It is relevant to the current communication in Japan because when analyzed, it shows the promotion of the Japanese collectivist culture and how the respect of elders plays a role in collectivism and communication as a whole. In the story Momotaro, Momotaro asks his parents for permission to help the village. This is interesting because it shows how large of a role the parents play in Japanese families. This is a huge contrast to American culture where people are taught to be individuals and do what they feel is best in a given situation. The protagonist meets companions along the way that help the protagonist solve the problem and help the village. The main character becomes successful in his quest and returns the stolen goods and money to the village and repays his parents for all they've done for him. This shows the promotion of collectivism in Japan and how everyone works to achieve a common goal and what is best for the country.
It has been known that Japanese companies usually employ new employees right out of high school and college. Once hired, employees perform a ceremony, almost like at graduation, where the president gives speeches and students recite mottos and the missions of the company, and they pledge their loyalty to the company and promise to work hard for the greater good. After, they go through introduction training, where they live together and participate in group activities, which enables bonding between people, similar to college orientation. However, employers are reluctant to hire employees with work experience from other companies, as they are afraid that they will disrupt the harmony within the company. Within a company, there are different levels of workers. Full-time regular workers the best, they're treated the best, and they get the best benefits. Other workers, such as regular, temporary, part-time, contract, and dispatch, get good benefits, but they're not as good as full-time. Part-time workers are given hourly benefits. Contract, dispatch assigned to client companies, they receive wages from personal dispatch companies as well. Within the workplace there is hibatsu, or cliques, based upon where the employees graduated. For example, if an employer went to the University of Tokyo, and if one of his employees went there as well, he would be treated better than the employee from other schools, regardless of performance or quality. When dealing with decision-making, there are a few Japanese methods that are very different than American methods. To begin, the company president cannot make swift, important decisions without others' approval, unless he owns the company. The Ringi decision-making style is based on harmony, cooperation, and consensus. The process is Kiansha, or the plan initiator, writes the Ringisho, or the proposal, and engage in a ni-mawashi, which is a discussion about and the approval of the proposal. If people like the proposal, he will then write the draft. Once the draft is written, it is passed around, starting with lower employees, then to middle management, and then finally to the CEO and president for review. Each have to stamp it with the seal of approval before passing it on. The president of the company is the last one to see it. His approval, or hasai, is the final step in the Ringi process. The second biggest difference is the Kaigi conference, which is unlike American business meetings in that instead of trying to persuade someone to settle on an agreement or an investment, they are affirming someone's position that they already decided on. In other words, it's like a just making sure, or a so what have you decided meeting. Talking about what has already been discussed and thought about. Also, Japanese presidents and CEOs do not dominate the conversation, but rather facilitate the conversation and give input only when necessary. Some tips for being successful in a Japanese business setting are to never complain directly during business meetings, but to rather go out to dinner and drink with other employees to show and vent your feelings and frustrations towards them. It is also important to maintain close personal relationships with business partners.
Do not rush Japanese meetings and decision-making.
Do not consider ringi negative because it is slow and cumbersome.
Bring gifts for Japanese counterparts.
Understand Japanese culture and customs.
Do not talk too much and do not dominate discussions.
Be patient. Do not focus on time, but rather fostering the business relationship regardless of how much time it takes.
Prepare visual aids to go along with presentations.
It is important to understand that many changes have been implemented within the Japanese school system since World War II. It used to be based on a 6-5-3-3, but now follows a 6-3-3-4 system. In other words, 6 years of elementary school, 3 years of junior high school, 3 years of senior high school, and 4 years of university. One large difference between the Japanese school system and the American school system is that they focus on group harmony and group rules, whereas we pay close attention to individualism. In elementary school, Japanese students learn traditional Japanese activities, such as shodo, or calligraphy, and they also learn to write haikus. These activities are taken seriously within schools so that students will learn to value their own culture and the traditions within it. In terms of break time, lunch is a time to visit with students within the classroom. Students have one of the longest school days in the world within Japan, so lunchtime is truly valued. Cultural activities are also praised and strongly recommended for students throughout the year. This could include races, excursions to historical sites, dancing, etc. In terms of the Japanese elementary school setup, one teacher usually teaches all of the subjects to a group of students. Uniforms are also required in most elementary settings. In middle school and high school settings, uniforms are primarily required. Boys wear pants and jackets with stand-up collars, and girls wear two-piece suits with sailor collars or blazers and skirts. Similarly to elementary school expectations, middle school students are pushed strongly to include extracurricular activities in their schedules. These can include music, science, and sports clubs. Sports teams are the most common, however, and practice is non-negotiable. In fact, sport team practices consume most of students' time when they are finished with academic obligations. Baseball is quite common among young boys, and judo, a type of traditional martial arts, is also common among both males and females. In terms of cultural clubs, the Go Club is becoming very common. Go refers to a strategic board game including white and black stones. In the high school setting, uniforms are sometimes introduced. For the most part, the curriculum follows the general requirements including mathematics, science, the Japanese language, and English. During the first year, the course load is pretty basic. During the second year, class choices become more specialized and as individualized as a school setting can get in a collectivistic culture. Throughout the entire Japanese schooling process, students tend to stay pretty quiet during class hours. In terms of university, Japan already had higher education by the start of World War II. Japanese universities are known to be extremely difficult to get into in that students are required to take entrance examinations. This is also extremely common among high school students. Japanese universities are divided into 3 categories: national universities, public universities, and private universities. Private universities account for most of the higher education within Japan. This is the time in which many students study abroad, not only Japanese students, however. Many American students travel abroad to study among the Japanese university system. In situations such as these, it is important for international students to keep in mind the types of communication involved in Japanese culture. On that note, we will now move on to informal settings and how to behave within them. Even in informal situations, manners are still a crucial part of communication. The traditional greeting is still a bow in Japan. Japanese people are known for treading carefully in conversations and being somewhat indirect. This is caused by the high context culture in which they live. Along the same lines, the Japanese also highly value the importance of personal space, especially when meeting a stranger for the very first time. In even more informal situations, friend and family interactions, there are still expectations for each member of a community. In the family, the wife/mother is relied on to cook the meals, lay out her husband's clothes, and raise the children. The husband of the home makes the money and primarily works a 6-day work week. The children are required to be studious and respectful. Familial interactions are still considered in some lights to utilize formal greetings and communication styles. Also, even if someone is in an informal setting with friends and family, if one does not know another person within the group, they should be more cautious and use a more formal tone and greeting to introduce themselves.
Throughout our show, the relevance and fragility of language as it pertains to business, school, and informal settings has been discussed. We have highlighted nonverbal messages and their importance, as well as the differences between American and Japanese cultures in terms of communication and general interaction styles. While the Japanese lifestyle can seem very similar to the Americans, it is actually quite different in many aspects.
The subtle differences actually have had a huge impact on how interactions and relationships ensue within Japan. When one goes to Japan, it is crucial to know that the Japanese are a very high-context society, and that while speaking the language is important, it's often the values, lessons, and actions that are most important when involved in intercultural communication with the Japanese.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our show. We hope you learned a substantial amount about communication in Japan, and we hope that this information will help you when you find yourself communicating with Japanese people in all sorts of settings. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Communication 101.